Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to our final episode of Horror Spooky Sunday Stories. Well, at least for this year. Maybe we'll get to do it again next year. So, the short I'm reading today is written by horror author Stephanie Rabig. If you're not familiar, she's actually been on my channel before. We did her influential horror at the beginning of the year. I will link that in the cloud wherever it shows up. Yeah, these have been really, really great. Like I said, previously, I'm always amazed at like what people can come up with creative wise when it comes to Christmas horror. There's so many things you can do. There really is. Because technically speaking, anything that takes place on Christmas that's a horror story is Christmas horror. Right? So anyway, moving right along. All right. So without further ado, here's our short story. Here we are as in Olden Days by Stephanie Rabig. So, Sadie drawled, sidling up to her best friend and bumping hips. We're doing some ganj. Oh my God. Smoking some Mary Jane. Nobody even says going mad with reefer. I'm divorcing you. Can't divorce me. We're not married. Whatever the friend equivalent of divorce is. There is none. You're stuck with me. I've got to start making better life choices. Starting tomorrow, Sadie said, watching as Harper crumbled up one of the buds. Right now, drugs. Harper laughed, then huddled down a little deeper into her coat. I can't believe Charlotte made us come out here. I'm freezing my ass off. Harper had burst through their door about 10 minutes ago, calling herself Santa Claus as she waved the baggie of weed. Normally, Charlotte would have been happy to join in, or at least ignore them as they went into one of the bedrooms to smoke. But she'd gotten a new job at a hardware store 2 weeks ago, and her paranoia over someone smelling it on her clothes had made her banish them outside, where they were currently huddling in the tool shed for warmth. Is it me, or has she been acting weird lately? Sadie shrugged. No weirder than usual. She's just super panicky since her old place shut down. It had taken her 5 months to find a new job, leaving her to beg her parents for enough money to make her share of their rent. Her parents had helped, but they'd also taken every opportunity to lecture her about how if she'd just gone to nursing school like her mother and uncle and grandmother, she wouldn't have to worry about all this. Pretty sure if her new boss asked her to donate a kidney, she'd do it. Ugh, don't give that creeper any ideas. Yeah, now there's a weird guy. I can't believe Charlotte took a job with an anti-masker, Harper said, passing her the joint. I mean, at least he's not one of those assholes who won't let his employees wear one. I'm not giving him any benefit of the doubt, Harper said. You saw the bandage on Charlotte's arm. Yeah, Sadie said, taking a long pull from the joint before passing it back. Charlotte had come home from work about a month ago with a bandage on her wrist and a grumbled explanation that she'd been demonstrating how to use a power saw and had slipped. She'd refused to let them look at it and refused any kind of workman comp report, insisting that she was fine and it had just been an accident. I bet OSHA would have a field day with that place. Never thought I'd be grateful to work fast food. Harper groaned as she heard high-pitched barking coming from the house. Oh, come on, Goldie. I just took you out. Maybe Charlotte will do it. Yeah, maybe, Harper said, opening the door just enough to drop what remained of the joint outside and grind it with her foot. I swear, that dog is all bladder. A few seconds later, Goldie stopped barking and Harper grinned. Thanks, Charlotte, she called. A grumble was their only answer, and both of them laughed. Then Sadie's phone chimed. She dug it out of her pocket, smiling when she saw it was a message from her girlfriend. Laura's off early. Nice, Harper said. Want me to leave you alone so you can sext? Sadie laughed and elbowed her, and Harper stepped out of the tool shed, shutting the door behind her. She looked up, smiling, as she saw a few snowflakes drifting out of the darkness. If it kept this up, maybe they'd have a white Christmas day after tomorrow, or at least a vague dusting of powder Christmas, which was more than they'd gotten the past couple of years. At least it would at least make for a pretty end to the miserable shit heap that had been 2020, she thought. She'd been ready to write the year off back in February when Tim had broken up with her. Then had come March, and with it, a modern-day plague. Wasn't like we would have been able to have a huge Halloween wedding this year anyway. She grinned and then opened her mouth, trying futilely to catch a snowflake on her tongue for a couple of minutes before heading back toward the house. She'd taken only a few steps when her foot squished down onto something, and her nose told her what it was an instant later. Oh, gross, she wailed, and she heard Sadie's voice from the shed behind her. Harper? I'm fine. Just stepped in a present. Goldie left. Ew. Tell me about it. I'm going to go take a shower after I hose off this boot, she thought. At least it wasn't summer. Then she would have just been in her sandals, or worse, barefoot. Okay, I'll be in soon. Harper started to wipe her boot off in the grass, then frowned and took out her phone, turning on the flashlight. Goldie was a Pomeranian. What she'd just stepped in was about half the size of the little dog. It couldn't have been anything she'd left, and it was steaming in the cold air. Don't freak out, she thought, as she heard a low growl from the darkness off to her left. Alvarez's Saint Bernard just dug his way out again. The dog growled and barked at everything that moved, but was actually a sweetheart. Hey, buddy, she called, shining the light toward where she'd heard the growl. You need me to walk you back home? There was nothing there. Buddy? And there was movement, but from something much taller than Buddy. She swung her phone around and caught a glimpse of dark fur and yellow eyes and masses of teeth before the phone tumbled through the air as a swipe of claws cut nearly all the way through her arm. Harper's mouth dropped open in an attempted cry, but all that came out was a high hiss of air, and then the creature was on her. Harper, Sadie called, lowering her phone slightly and covering the mouthpiece, listening for an answer before she raised it back to her ear. What's going on? Laura asked. Oh, I thought I heard Harper say something. She was calling for Buddy. I swear they should have named him Houdini, Laura laughed. At least Goldie doesn't get out all the time. Not because she doesn't try. Every time I head out for work in the morning, she tries to dive past my ankles. Aw, she just wants to chase a few squirrels. Pretty sure the squirrels are bigger than she is, Sadie said. Then her phone beeped and she swore. She looked at the screen. Shit, I'm at 2%. I'll call you back in a few minutes. Okay, love you. Love you too, Sadie said, hitting end before opening the shed door. She circled around the general area where she'd heard Harper's voice coming from, hoping to avoid the poop. It was starting to snow, and she frowned up at the sky as she hurried past the side of their small house. My windows better not be iced up in the morning, she muttered, and then her frown deepened as she came within sight of the front door. It was standing open. She'd known Harper was in a rush to get in the shower, but come on. Sadie hurried in and shut the door behind her, putting her phone in the living room charger before calling out for Goldie. Nothing. Damn it. Hey, Charlotte, she called. I think Goldie got out. No answer from her either. Maybe she'd stepped out with Goldie. It was a bit late to take her for a full-on walk, but if she'd seen one of their neighbors outside, she was probably talking with them. Charlotte rarely missed an opportunity to strike up a conversation with anyone. Dodging the presents piled around the Christmas tree, she headed toward the kitchen, intent on grabbing a snack while waiting for her phone to charge. Then she hesitated. Something was wrong. The bathroom, she realized. The door was standing open. Harper wasn't in there. Come to think of it, had her boots been on the porch? She'd been focusing on the open door, yeah, but she was pretty sure she'd remember smelling something if Harper had just kicked off her boots and run inside. Harper? She called, heading into her roommate's bedroom, also empty. What the hell? She muttered. Neither of her friends were the pranking type. Hey, she called, walking back towards the kitchen. Where are you guys? The fridge was standing open too. Sadie shut the door, then yelped and scrambled back when that revealed a bright smear of red on the floor. And was that a clump of fur? She tried to draw in a full breath, tried not to hyperventilate as she grabbed one of the kitchen knives. She could picture everything clearly in her mind. Harper had come home, waving the plastic baggie of weed. She and Harper had headed out to the shed, leaving Charlotte alone with Goldie in the house. Someone had knocked. Charlotte, surely assuming a neighbor, had grabbed her mask, put it on, and opened the door. A psycho at the door shoved his way in. Charlotte ran. Goldie barked her head off, which she and Harper had heard out in the shed, and the guy killed her, then went to find where Charlotte was hiding. Maybe she hadn't hid, though. Maybe she kept running. Would she have had time to make it out the back door? Warily eyeing her bedroom door and the open door to the bathroom, Sadie opened the back door and stared out into the night. The backyard looked ominous in the darkness, no light until the street lamp in front of the Alvarez's house. She wanted to call out, but her mouth felt too dry to form words. Sadie turned and hurried back to the front room where she'd left her phone, her finger hovering over the 9 before she hesitated. What if she is picturing this all wrong? Laura was always teasing her about her addiction to true crime shows. Maybe the blood was from Charlotte. That cut her on her arm could have opened up again. That was it. She bumped into something and reopened the cut, and then had been getting a bandage when Goldie started barking to go out. She'd taken her out, missing the latch on the front door in a hurry. There hadn't actually been fur on the floor. It had been something else, and she'd misinterpreted that in her panic. And what about Harper? There's an explanation for that too, she thought, as she set the phone back down. What she wasn't going to do was figure that explanation out after she'd called the cops while she still reeked of pot. Hell, for all she knew, it hadn't been blood at all. Maybe Charlotte had dropped a jar of strawberry jam, and she and Harper had seen how it looked and decided to prank her. Maybe they were outside even now, giggling as Goldie growled at a snowflake. Then go check, she thought. You want to think that wasn't blood? You want to think you imagined the fur? Go check. She couldn't move. Sadie squeezed her eyes shut, embarrassed and angry about the tears that dripped down her face when she did. Guys, she yelled, startling herself with the loudness of her own voice. This isn't funny. She opened her eyes again and found herself staring at a monster. It filled the doorway to the hall, dark fur grotesquely illuminated by the tree's red and green blinking lights, its bloodied teeth bared. Sadie didn't remember scrambling to her feet, didn't remember throwing the front door open, but she'd almost gotten out into the porch before claws sank into her shoulder and dragged her back. The animal flung her across the living room, and she crashed into the tree, shrieking in pain as she landed on broken Christmas ornaments. Tears blurring her vision, Sadie grabbed present after present, pelting the approaching creature with first the gifts and then some of the ornaments, praying she might get lucky and get some glass shards in its eyes. Then she saw something gleaming in the lights from the battered tree, the knife. She dropped it when she'd landed. It had skidded across the floor. Now she lunged forward, making a desperate grab for the weapon as the animal, werewolf, it was a goddamn werewolf, leaped. She stabbed the knife into its chest as hard as she could. The werewolf howled, staggering back, snarling as it regrouped. Sadie pushed herself to her feet and grabbed the handle of the knife, intent on yanking it out and stabbing this thing again, but the werewolf darted its head forward and bit her hand. Sadie cursed and grabbed one of the creature's ears with her free hand, twisting it. As soon as its mouth gaped open in pain, Sadie yanked her hand away and ran, vaulting down the porch steps and racing out into the sidewalk. She kept going. A moment later, another sound wormed its way through the gate, gasp of her own ragged breathing. Singing. Someone was singing. There, on a more well-lit part of the next block, where 3 houses in a row had neon light displays, the Alvarez kids were caroling. Their mother and father were with them, all of them with masks on, staying on the sidewalk instead of going right up on porches like they had last year. They'd adopted 3 kids, had twins a few years later, and then adopted 2 more. The youngest was barely 4, and her dad was carrying her. They'd brought over a giant tin of cookies to welcome the 3 of them to the neighborhood when they'd moved here a couple of years ago. If anyone could actually pull off the everyone wearing matching outfits for the holiday photo thing, it was the Alvarez family. Shit, she couldn't lead this thing to them. She turned, seeing the werewolf running down the sidewalk toward her, moving far too fast for something that still had the handle of a butcher knife jutting out of its chest. Weirdly, instead of being terrified, she felt a floating calmness come over her, as if she was cuddled down under a plush comforter watching a Hallmark movie, which was how she'd planned to spend the evening instead of facing down a horror movie monster. This was it. She was dead. Fuck it. At least I'll die a hero. Sadie charged forward to meet the monster, heedless of its teeth this time as she grabbed the knife handle and yanked the blade out, stabbing it in the throat. The werewolf let out a gasping attempt at a howl, then collapsed against her, its weight sending her to the ground even as it scratched at her again, its razor-sharp claws opening up her sternum. She stared at the full moon, smiling at the sight of the snowflakes twirling down. Maybe the roads would be awful tomorrow. Maybe her car would be iced up. But who cared? Not like she'd be driving. With some effort, she turned her head to the side and saw the werewolf's massive form shrinking, the hair fading away, leaving brown skin behind. The matted fur on its head shifted, replaced by Charlotte's black hair. It's a bite, she thought blearily, seeing the scar on her friend's arm for the first time. Power saw my ass, she whispered. Might have giggled if simple breathing wasn't making her chest burn. Maybe the werewolf, maybe Charlotte, had gotten her worse than she thought. She didn't want to look. Then she heard panicky voices approaching and let out a rattling sigh, trying not to worry too much about the bubble of blood that came up between her lips. It felt like a long shot, but maybe they'd get her to hospital in time. Living as a hero instead of dying as one, that might be nice. What happened, Sadie? Mrs. Alvarez asked, crouching down next to her. Sadie opened her mouth, tried to explain, but couldn't get any words out. It's okay, Miss Alvarez said. It'll be okay, I promise. She got to her feet and hurried over to her husband, and when she came back, she was holding his coat. She pressed it to her chest hard, and Sadie winced. I know, sweetie. I'm sorry. A whimper had her looking to Charlotte again, and she instinctively tried to get to her feet when she saw that her friend had reached up, was pulling the knife out of her neck. As soon as the blade was out, the fur began sprouting from her skin again, her teeth elongating as she grinned. Stupid stainless steel knife, she thought hysterically. It's okay. Look at me, Mrs. Alvarez says. Stay with me, okay? We're getting an ambulance. Don't move. I've got to keep pressure on this. Sadie realized that she'd already written Charlotte off as dead. Why wouldn't she? She'd done her damnedest to decapitate her. She flopped back to the ground, unable to hold herself up any longer, her vision blacking out for a second from pain. Run, she whispered. What? Mrs. Alvarez asked. Her gaze still focused sharply on the wound. Mr. Alvarez was several feet away. The kids gathered around him like ducklings. He was talking rapidly on the phone while cradling their youngest child in his free arm. None of them were looking their way. That was Here We Are, as in Olden Days, by Stephanie Rabig. As always, I will put information to find Stephanie down in the description for this episode. And that's a wrap for this year's Christmas horror spooky Sunday stories. Starting back in January, I'll be going back to rotating weekends for these. There is also, I don't know, by the time this comes out, I don't know if this information will be released. There's going to be a new collaboration in January, so we may be switching back to once a month for these. We'll kind of have to see how that schedule goes. But if you are a horror author and you are interested in sending me either a short or a chapter or two out of a book that you have, I am absolutely happy to read everything that is sent to me. It's not a submission. I will read everything sent to me. If you want to offer that up, I would be honored to read what you guys have. Just let me know. You can DM me on Twitter. You can comment below on this video. I'm on everything. You can find me everywhere. So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Christmas horror spooky Sunday stories. And yeah, see you guys in the next one.